we have up next, we have Trine Falbe. She has been working within UX for about 20 years. She's really dedicated to responsible design and innovation, and she currently works as the head of innovation at Smart Academy in Denmark. So that's really exciting. And she, in addition to that, she does a lot of building digital products as an entrepreneur herself. So Trine, would you like to kick us off? Let's talk about responsible product design.
Let's do it. Thank you so much for the introduction. And welcome to the talk on responsible product design. So whenever I talk to people, I rarely hear them say that responsible design is a bad thing. In fact, I never hear people say, well, you know, we don't want to do any responsible design because we really don't care about it. So that's a good thing, right? We're all kind of motivated to work on this kind of stuff, whether we're motivated towards responsible design because we genuinely want to ship better products and make the world a tiny bit better than the world that we have behind us, or whether it's because we want to advance in our careers and, you know, have better success. Most of the people, at least that I talk to, are actually motivated to making better products. But the questions that I often get is that I'm not sure how to drive this change. I'm not sure how I will be able to do that. And also, where do I start? So that is going to be the focus of this talk. Now, in order to answer those questions, I'm actually not going to talk that much about product design on its own, because we can't do responsible design if we just look at the sort of the product, the manifestation, because products are affected by the business, by the people who make them, by the people who use them, and by the process in which we make them in. And the product also affects all these elements back, right? And to make matters even more complicated, all these different elements, business and people and processes and product, affect each other internally. So this very often comes to show in the product. All the decisions being made in the business or by people and during the process, they manifest themselves in the product. So when we, for instance, see an interface like this, bad decision made by Huel, who sells nutrition supplements. They decided to pre-select a few items when you enter their web shop. So they just decided to pop in a few products in your web shop, in your cart. And if you want to not buy them, you actually have to deselect them or take them out again manually. And they thought this was a really good idea. And all sort of standards in UX, you know, tell the opposite story. But this was not the point is that this was not a decision that was made by the designer who did the actual interface. This was probably a decision made somewhere in the business where someone thought that this was a good idea. I don't know who would think that, but someone did. Or when you look at an interface like this, this is an interface or a web shop where you can buy concert tickets, for instance. And they have so many different elements that actually trigger anxiety in people because they make heavy use of loss aversion. That who would think that this would be a good idea? And these decisions are certainly not made up by the designer who made the interface. They're made somewhere else in the organization, in the ecosystem around the product. So in order to talk about proper responsible design, product design, we need to look under the hood and figure out what's going on. And I'm very focused on responsible ethical design. In fact, I wrote a book about it back in 2019 together with two business partners. And there's a lot to be said about this, but I'll touch upon a few things from the book and generally in this talk. We also need to understand what are the drivers of change, because there are some drivers externally in the world that drive certain changes. But we also need to figure out, okay, how can we personally drive change from inside? So there are a couple of mega trends that are interesting to look at. One is, so a mega trend is, you can consider them sort of currents, right? Big waves that you have to sort of move with, that you can't really work against. One of these mega trends is sustainability. That's pretty apparent. But the other one is actually responsibility. There is an increased demand and expectation towards responsibility. And put on top of that, we have this accelerated digital transformation that we've all been through through the COVID-19 crisis. We've had to define new ways of working. We've had to define new systems. We've all been accustomed to digital in a much greater sense than we were 2 years ago. Just to give you a few examples of how powerful this is. In the US, online sales have grown times 10 compared to predictions over the COVID-19 crisis. And McKinsey did a study that showed that in the people that they asked, 50% of these people have tried new ways of shopping, which was basically online shopping. And 65% of those 50% said that they would continue to do so. So the acceleration in the digital transformation is severe. But there are also some other factors that are interesting when we talk about digital transformation and what's happening around us. One is the increased transparency and the increased expectation of transparency. So with the internet, we have received a gift of transparency. As consumers, we can compare prices, we can become our own product experts, basically. We no longer have to go to a store and ask someone for expert advice to become more knowledgeable about a product. We can just go online and search for it. And there is also an increased transparency the other way around. We can look up reviews online, and lots of studies have showed that we actually trust our peers much more than we trust the brands. So these reviews can be both really good for companies, but also really problematic for companies. But they've empowered, this transparency have empowered the consumers to become more, to help themselves much more in this area. With increased transparency, we've also seen a rise in the frustration that we experience when we're exposed to things like hidden costs, right? Because hidden costs are the opposite of transparency. So for instance, when we come across an interface like this, where by magic, the price goes up by almost 100% because of all sorts of hidden fees, that frustrates us. And in fact, according to a study by Baymart, showed that 24% of users who have abandoned an order within the past 3 months, they did so because they couldn't see or calculate the total order cost. So they didn't even get that far. They didn't even get to the, oh, there are more costs. They just exited the shopping cart before they even got there. But transparency also goes beyond pricing because you can't really run a responsible business if your pricing model is responsible, but you are violating people's digital privacy by selling their data without their knowledge. So one of my favorite examples and favorite companies out there is Link's Cars. This is Ling in her office, eating lunch, actually just showing her customers that she's there and that she's reachable. But Link's Cars work with transparency in multiple ways, not just in their pricing. We can all agree they're super challenged in design, and this has also become part of the brand. But they've managed to build a super strong brand because of their extreme customer focus, maybe also because of their kind of kitschy design, I don't know. But the extreme customer focus is really apparent. And here's a paragraph from the privacy policy. It states that I would love to sell the data because I would make a fortune out of it, but I don't. I put it on a compost heap called old data and I sit on it. Eventually worms eat it. I think this is a great example of transparency and responsible design because one, you're saying, I don't sell my customers' data. Two, you're communicating it in a way that they understand. So this is great. These are great examples of how to work with transparency. The second element that we need to look into is traceability. So again, with digitization, we've seen a huge increase in our abilities to trace information. So this goes both ways as well. But before all this, when you bought something in a store, you got a paper receipt. And this paper receipt was kind of your golden ticket in case this product broke, right? So sometimes it was, really hard to document the truth if the receipt got lost. I've been there a couple of times or many times, and I'm sure you have too. There was no way to document whether you'd had the product for 6 months or 12 months or 2 years. So these digital systems help consumers. They empower us as consumers to document what's going on and what's been going on between us and the company. but the companies can also make use of all this digital tracing and use that as their advantage. So here is an example. This is actually another example from Links course, because I love this great system as well, because traceability has also increased the company's ability to document their customer communication, and they can store receipts and so on, but they can also store the communication. And Links course built a system called Lingo, obviously, to document customer communication. And this is of mutual benefit because there is like a neutral ground of transcript where you can go to and figure out, okay, what happened here in case of a dispute. So it's super powerful. The third factor that impacts digital transformation is simplicity. And we're seeing a huge increase in demand for simplicity. One place where this is highly evident is in e-commerce. Another Baymart study showed that 23% of cases where an online purchase is abandoned, it's because of an overly complicated checkout process. If people think something is too complicated, they just leave. So there is no doubt that there is a transformation on the rise, digital transformation on the rise. And there is also a huge expectation and pressure from customers for us to create more responsible products. But as professionals, it can be super hard to figure out how to get started, how to actually initiate this change. And it's something that I hear a lot. How do I do it as a professional, as a UX designer, as a product manager? How do I instigate this change? I want to make this change. I want to make this change in my team, in my organization, in my company. How do I do that? And the sort of obvious answer to that is we need to start making better decisions. So how do we make better decisions? Well, one way we can do that is by challenging the decisions that we make. And there's a way to do that by asking questions on that decision. So there are sort of 4 key questions that you should ask yourself about a decision to make sure that it sort of conforms to the responsibility that you're trying to uphold in the ethical design frame. One is, why are we actually making this decision? Are we making it to cater to the business or to the people that use the product? Ideally, it should be something, all decisions should be of benefit to the business and the consumers. It's, you can't just make decisions that only cater to the business. It's typically a really bad route. For instance, if you want to increase the number of signups in a newsletter by 10%, what you don't want to do is so the bad approach would be to automatically sign people up to newsletters, because that would only cater to you as a business, and it would give such a backlash on the end. But sure, you would increase your sign up rate by 10% at least. Whereas the good approach to that would be to add value to your newsletter so that people would want to actually sign up to it. The next question you can ask yourself is, who benefits from the decision? So is it, what problems are we solving through the decision? Is it something that, again, is faced internally, or is it something that we've actually thought about the end customers, that they would also benefit from the decision that we're making? Are we making people's lives more easy, comfortable, better, or is it just, again, looking inwards and maximizing our own profit? Third question is about consequences. What are the consequences of this decision? So we don't think about this enough. We don't think about long-term and short-term consequences. Often we just think about actually short-term consequences, but a lot of decisions can have long-term effects, negative effects on the people who are on the other end. And the fourth and last question is actually a question that I should spike sort of or spark an emotional response in you. And that would be, would I want my loved ones to be using this product or to be on the other end of this decision? The reason why this question is so important to ask is it forces you to decide, your initial emotional response. And if your initial answer is no, I don't want my sibling or spouse or child to be on the other end of this decision, the next question you have to ask yourself is, why is that? Why is it that you don't want someone you care about to be on the other end of this decision? Then it's probably a problematic decision that you're about to make. And sort of I think the ultimate acid test, really, if we can't, spend tons of time looking into questions about decisions, is, am I proud of the work that I'm doing? Am I proud of this thing that I just helped make? So I think if we just put that into an example, I'm super proud to have built this feature that allows for people to sign up with just one step, reducing friction and ensuring their digital safety. This would be something that you would be proud of, right? On the other end of the scale, so proud to have built a feature that secretly adds product to the user's shopping cart. Not so much. I don't think that the people who actually worked on the Huel interface and decided that it was a great idea to secretly put 2 extra products in my shopping cart actually would be proud and would want to share this result or this decision with anyone. One of the decisions that I'm most proud of personally to have made, to have helped make or instigate, was when I worked at a startup where we had kids as our primary target group. And I convinced the management, the CEO, to stop collecting gender data. This was a really proud moment for me. And, it's a decision that I share with others, or a result that I share with others when I can, because this is something that makes me proud. And these are the types of decisions that we should make, much more than, the Huel interface and kind of putting stuff into people's shopping carts. Can you imagine being in a supermarket and you're walking down the aisle and you're putting stuff in your cart, and someone kind of sneaks up behind you and just drops something in your cart? You would never you would never do that. You would never, accept that. Why would anyone think that that's acceptable behavior, but just because it's a online store? Mind blowing. But it's easy for me to say we need to make better decisions. To make better decisions, we first have to enable better decisions. This is kind of key, right? And to enable better decisions, we have to give people mandate to do so. And you know what? We don't talk about governance models enough. Governance models are, I don't know, considered boring. It's not something you want to be entertained by at a dinner party or something like that. But governance models are sort of the key to giving people mandate to create good decisions. So a governance model is a set of rules that specifies how a team should work together, or how an organization works, typically on sort of team level. And what it should include, if you want to focus on responsible, ethical design, is your standards and your objectives. What is it that we're trying to achieve? How are we going to build new features and touch points to meet these objectives? We have to define this. I'm sure a lot of you think that you know this, but put on the spot, can you define it? Can you describe how you do that? And I think this is actually one of the most important things in the governance model. You have to define and describe to what degree people have responsibility and freedom to decide certain things. This is what really gives the mandate, because we can all agree that we want to, pursue certain goals. We want to make sure that we act responsibly and so on and so forth. But if you don't give team members mandate to make decisions that you might disagree on as a manager, but the fact is that the decisions support the objective. If you don't give them that mandate, you're not moving anywhere. You're just kind of staying put. And last but not least, you need to define how tests are performed and their success criteria. So what are the criteria of success? How do we make sure that we meet those success criteria? How do we test it? Do we just, what type of sort of stop block do we put in front of or behind, before launch to make sure that this meets the success criteria? This is also an area where a lot of teams get a little bit sloppy, and especially when we're busy, we kind of just jump over the test fence, which typically creates problems. Okay, so now we kind of know that we need to have this governance model in place. But where do you start? Where do I start? And before I say more about that, what I want to stress is that you have to be patient. You're not going to change any practices overnight. But the changes that you will make, because they move slow, will be, more significant and something that will last longer, most likely. But the place that you can start is to figure out, what are the state of things? Where do we stand right now? And a great place to do that, a great way to do that, is by doing what we call a scorecard review. So a scorecard is a general tool that helps you do a pulse check, and sort of a pulse check on the state of things. And in this case, we've decided to pulse check how we do on UX and UI. So you can actually download a template for these scorecards on the Ethical Design Handbook's website. And it comes with 7 other scorecards on different areas like data collection and governance and user involvement. So let me just walk you through how this type of tool works. So a scorecard consists of a set of statements, and it contains also an evaluation score and a weight for each of these. And what you do is you calculate the actual score of each statement and compare it to the highest possible score. And this gives you a very good indicator on the state of things. And this is a really good starting point, because it gives you like a clear picture of, regardless of whether you only focus on one area or whether you decide to put the entire process, the entire design process, through a scorecard review, you get a really good indicator both on the general state of things, but also you're able to actually pinpoint on these different statements and use them as a benchmark tool. So once you've done your scorecard review, what you want to do is to create a baseline. You create a set of baseline metrics that you can use to track your improvements over time. And it's a really good way to utilize the scorecard review and the insights that you got from that, because it gives you this specific point of action to focus on design and extend past these standard KPI metrics that I guess most of us have come to, know and hate. So it moves us past that and enables us to measure on more qualitative metrics. And there are many reasons why this is actually a good approach, to focus more on design metrics and less on standard business metrics. McKinsey did research over 5 years with more than 300 companies across different sectors. And they created a benchmark tool called the McKinsey Design Index. And what they found in this research over 5 years is that the businesses with the biggest success have some things in common. One, they work user-centered throughout the organization. This is great news for UX designers. Design plays a key role in strategic planning. They have robust design metrics to measure customer satisfaction, and the design department is not a silo. So these 4 things are common ground for businesses that succeed, that have the greatest success in this index benchmark. And I have to stress, because sometimes people get a little bit scared of new types of KPIs and what do we do? But the thing is, responsible design is not more work, it's different work. We already have all the tools, the benchmark, we know benchmark measurements, we know KPIs, we know governance models, we know design processes. All of these can be utilized for responsible design. So we're not trying to teach a new or learn a new tool set, we just need to use it slightly differently. I also want to say that when you see, if you decided, okay, we need to change, you see that, you realize that things move slow. It's like running uphill. You have to remember that you're treading a new trail and you're creating new habits. And it's okay that it doesn't, move super fast, as long as you're moving, because this is something that has become sort of a life mentality for me. Change starts with movement. To make any kind of change, we have to move forward. Whatever you do, keep moving. So, in 6 or 12 months, when you look back, all of a sudden you realize that you've actually made, progress. But you have to just start moving. It's not important where you start, it's important that you start. And according to Psychology Today, to succeed with change, slow is better. They say, move slow, you'll get better change, lasting change. Change requires structure, new ways of working, governance models to work. You also have to protect new behaviors. So maintain them and protect them with your governance model, with the agreements that you made in your team. We can't just agree on stuff and then not agree afterwards. Have to, solidify the agreements. And last but not least, small successes are big. Forget about the incremental or the radical change paradigm almost. It's as if unless we do radical change, it doesn't really matter, but it actually does. And with that, I want to share a personal story with you. It's about my journey from 0 to 8K from when I started running. I've never been a runner. In fact, I've always been the type of person who would say, I only run when I'm being chased by vicious monsters or, something like that. Just kind of because I didn't really want to admit to myself that I was super out of shape and that I actually didn't want to move past my couch. But then I started getting these really severe knee pains about 2.5 years ago. So I went to my doctor and because they didn't go away, and she said, there's nothing wrong with your knees, but you're out of shape. And that kind of hit me. I just turned 40, delicate time of life, I can tell you. So that was not the best. That wasn't the best thing to be told. But it actually took me about 6 months to really make any kind of changes. I started biking a little bit, and the knees, got okay. But I really wanted to do something better for myself. But I had to convince myself that I wanted to start running because, this actually turned out to be a very efficient type of exercise. So it took me 6 months to do any significant change. But in October, I found a program called From 0 to 5K or From Couch to 5K by the NHS. And I started running. And it only took about 10 weeks before I got from 0 to 5K. And now, 2 years and 2 major injuries later, I'm actually at, towards 8K 2 times a week. So this is what my journey looks like. And you know what, if you look at where I am now, it's a fairly good place, not super special, certainly not if you compare it to people who do half marathon distances. But if I compare my current state with my starting point, I've actually made pretty awesome progress, even with all the setbacks. And this is really a mentality that I try to bring to anything that I do in life, is that put one foot in front of the other. Even sometimes you have to sort of almost not move, you're still making progress. And if you look back 6, 12, 18, 24 months later, you'll see that you've actually made significant progress. And also, I think it's important to only compare with your own starting point and journey, not others. And that's why it's so important to create your own baseline and not compare to competitors and things like that when you talk about change and improvement. Look at your own baseline. That's the most important thing. So, with movement, with determination, with patience, we'll get there. You can get there with a responsible design. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Trine. That was just fantastic, and big bravo for your meteoric rise and what you're able to accomplish with your running. I was looking at your graph there, and I was like, oh, so that's when the pandemic was, and she still did it. It was really great to see. So congratulations there.
Thank you. Should I stop my screen share here?
Yeah, let's do that so we can see each other's faces.
Good.
Great. All right. So before we jump into a couple of questions, I do want to send people back over to our polls tab. We want to know how you felt and how excited you are about Trine's great talk that she just gave us. And while you do that, we'll find out some more from our end. Also, please do post in our Q&A section if you do have some questions for us. So let's see here. We actually do have a couple questions in here now. So let's see here. Well, up first, Trine, without any support from the management level, can we actually succeed in making significant changes?
It's easier if you have, obviously, if you have management buy-in. But what I would say, what I would challenge, because I get it, I get why you feel not empowered by a manager who says, no, you can't do that, no, you can't do that. But sometimes it's because we ask the wrong questions, or we ask. So what I would challenge is that if you buy in to the fact that responsible design doesn't require a new tool set, what you can do is take an existing project and actually create the set of KPIs that you think work well for responsible design improvements. Because I will guarantee you that if you have a project, typically you have a project that you're responsible for, you work with, right? So I guarantee you that if you do that sort of under the radar, and you go in and you establish a baseline in the beginning of the project focused on responsible design, and at the end you prove that you actually made significant progress and you actually improved, for instance, customer satisfaction more than you would have done in a previous project, and you go and you show that to management, I'm pretty sure that they would say, this is a really good idea. Because the thing is that that often the best argument to management is that I didn't spend any more time, I didn't spend any more money, but I improved the results. So you can actually do that if you, but you probably want to do sort of under the radar in a project that already is, established. But that's a good, sometimes, it's a matter of asking for forgiveness rather than permission. But you don't really need forgiveness if you actually go in and improve the results. Sometimes we just have to make it easy for people to say yes, and we do that best by proving better results.
Absolutely, yeah, that's going to be our beeline to getting our stuff done there. That's for sure. Let's see, we've got another one here. So what is your kind of personal motivation? What do you personally care so much about with ethics and responsibility and design that kind of just drives you to, kind of follow this as your passion?
Okay. So I've been working in UX for almost 20 years. Before we called the UX, I started doing usability studies and information architecture and front-end stuff. But I've always worked user-centered. It's always been my key driver to really focus on the people who would be using the product that I was building. And I've always found that very hard to sort of to combine with not thinking about being responsible towards people. I've also worked a number of years with kids in design, and that really requires a high sense of responsibility because they are so, they're so delicate and so not matured mentally it's just a violation if we don't treat them well. So I think definitely having been in UX for so long really has done that. I think when I did a talk at a meetup a few months ago, and a UX meetup, and someone said, we are the rebels. So UXers are sort of the rebels. And I think that very much speaks to me. So it's very much a personal driving force.
I love that. I'm going to put that on my LinkedIn. I'm a rebel. Yeah. Excellent. All right. We've, let's see here, double check my time. All right. We're doing good. I got another great question here. Behind most dark pattern decisions, there's a business metric like revenue per user that kind of drives that. What are some better KPIs to track and how to be able to track how we're doing from that business and UX perspective?
Okay. So for instance, tracking something like, tracking something like how many support calls we get per 1,000 customers. That would be interesting. We don't often talk about, the cost of making money, but that's something that we should, right? Because the cost of making money through dark patterns could be an increase, a spike in our negative support calls. So we have to, I think, instead of only looking at sort of the business metric, look at what's going on in the organization. I would also challenge anyone who works in management to actually spend a day in support. That would be interesting. because we can get so much insight from spending some time in support, because that's where all the sort of the nasty stuff goes in, right? And I'm also pretty sure that we could also reduce a lot of friction in the product if we just looked at that as a source of truth. But that's one way to get away from the very sort of business-oriented KPIs. Generally looking at customer satisfaction rather than looking at sales bottom line is interesting.
Absolutely. Nope. I think you're spot on there. I was actually just skimming the next question that we have, and it kind of dovetails in really nicely with some of the things that we've talked about here. So you mentioned that in successful companies, the design department is not just working in a silo all by themselves. So do you have some tips for some of our folks here for how you can help make that happen, or, at least go back to your organization or your company and kind of challenge that notion?
I think a lot of organizations forget to look at the entire product life cycle. And that's definitely a place to start. Map out your product life cycle from initial marketing, onboarding. So marketing often doesn't, exist in product world, right? In product space, but it actually should, because the impact from marketing into the product is huge. If we onboard irresponsibly, or if there's like a mismatch between the way that we market and the actual product and what we actually promise and what we deliver, that's a problem, right? So looking at the entire product life cycle is a great way to extend design thinking across the organization. Also, maybe looking at some of the data models that exist. How's your onboarding actually? What data kind of flows back and forth? What value do we bring when we, do we have a freemium model? What does that exist? What does that consist of versus our premium? And what kind of value do we actually get there instead? But the whole point is by looking at the entire product lifecycle, including end of life. What happens when someone, exits the product? What happens when the product dies? Is really a good place to start. And again, I can't stress enough how important it is to look into your governance models. If you don't have any, get started.
Love that. I have a marketing background myself, and my favorite quote is always, I think the worst thing for a bad product is good marketing. So as long as you're staying in sync there, that's obviously a very important thing.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, we are running up on our time here, but I wanted to thank you so much for joining us today. This was really, really